Ready to conquer the wild with your camera? Keep listening as we discuss our approaches for adapting to tricky weather, midday light, and more, and how we turn infield challenges into opportunities. After the show, join us over on Patreon as a free or paid member to take part in the post-episode discussion. With that out of the way, let's get on to it. Hello, Jeffrey.
Hello.
It's been 2 weeks again since our last recording.
I know, it feels weird when we skip a week.
I know. I'm once again feeling out of practice for my introduction and the whole bit. But anyways, what have you been up to? I know we haven't. It's like the least we've probably chatted between episodes.
It really is.
I've been trying to let you be a little bit.
I think you were busy. I think you had a birthday in there somewhere, and you were probably distracted with that. And then I had a family reunion, which is in Ohio, but a couple hour-ish away. So I was doing that. So yeah, I've got an art fair coming up, and as we record this in a few weeks, and so I'm sort of redoing what I take to the art fair on that front. So that's been sort of time consuming. And then the family reunion, I did do some photography down there just a little bit, headed out early in the morning and stuff like that. But that's really it, trying to enjoy the lull and the pace of things before we hit fall workshop season, where things will get a lot busier. So just trying to regroup and reset. And
you sent your kid off to college, right, for the first time?
I did. I guess that was in there too. Took the kid to college. So they're going to school about 2.5 hours away from home. So had to drive them up and get them all established and settled in, and then get back home and stuff. So
nice.
Yeah. So I had that too, and then now we're tackling their room. Their room was a disaster, and we're tackling their room. My wife jumped right on that, so I've got a list of things I have to do there too.
Lucky you.
Yeah. So what have you been up to?
I can't say it's been like a terribly hectic 2 weeks or anything like that. Like you said, I had my birthday in the midst of it. I decided to kind of take it somewhat easy that week, but also I've alluded to it in that smaller Discord you and I are both in. Like, I've been in a bit of funk lately. I think part of it was leading up to my birthday, like the several weeks leading up, just the whole, my mom not being around anymore and everything. I've really been missing her a lot, and that's just kind of dragged me down in general, I think. Of course, in the back of my mind, I've also been tired lately, like we've talked before, and it's like, am I having like a mini flare with the Crohn's disease? And that's been wearing me down. But I think it's just kind of that summer doldrums. I was joking with Heather. It was like, I think I've got seasonal affective disorder in the summer. It's just because it's so hot
it's so
here.
Hot. Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to go outside. I got out, was it last weekend one morning? I got started at like 9:30. It was already like 90 degrees outside, and I was trying to rip down this out of control vine and a trellis I need to tear down and everything. It's just like after 45 minutes, I was just dying. But yeah, my motivation hasn't been the best. I will readily admit. I don't think this past week, I don't think I've really touched anything with the podcast aside from I made a thumbnail. I need to get back on track with editing. Not that we don't have a pretty good cushion still, but been kind of a weird month or so. On the cheerier side of the equation, I actually did edit some smoky photos.
Oh, nice.
I revisited some I had edited months ago, took a fresh look at them, and then actually knocked out a pretty good chunk of new ones too. Still haven't touched any of the focus stacks or anything like that. My motivation was not strong enough to make me deal with that.
Those are tough. Those are tough.
Yeah, I think most of them are pretty simple, but it's just the extra little tedious aspect of it. What else have I done? I decided yesterday, not really yesterday, but I started working on it full bore yesterday to completely redesign my homepage on the website. See if I can.
Your favorite procrastination activity when there's something else you should be doing. Let's work on the website. Right.
But I do like doing it. It's a nice procrastination tool. But also, as again, in that smaller Discord we're in, this is my worst year in print sales in a while, whereas last year's my best year. So I feel like I need to change something up in terms of trying to get some more traffic to the site. I was actually talking to Matt Payne, asking if he's seen a drop in traffic. So I feel like every time I open up my Wix dashboard and look at it, it's like month-over-month traffic's down 15%, down 30%. Mm-hmm. Part of it is my Forerunner blog has finally kind of lost its juice, I think. That's still one of my top drivers of traffic, but the Canon R5 blog or R5 Mark II blog that I'd written lost steam. So it's just older topics that were very kind of more topical per se. I think losing some steam, but yeah, I got to get some juju going around the print side and the workshop side, especially now I'm starting to do those. Those drive direct money as opposed to the blogs, which are usually just passive through video clicks or affiliate sales or whatever. So yeah, I'm trying to tackle that. Of course, in the midst of that, I decided to change some of the fonts on the site and that too. So now I got to go through the whole site, because why not create more work that I can procrastinate on everything else with. That's about it. I've got a presentation next week before we record. Oh, cool. I'm doing Roy Morris's Photo Club UK. This will be the third time I've presented with them, so looking forward to that. Nice. That group has really blown up. He's done a really good job of building that group up. So
awesome.
Yeah, that should go well.
What's your topic? Are you allowed to say your topic yet?
Yeah. Similar to what I've done for my last couple of presentations, it's going to be about my whole kind of visualization to realization discussion about how I visualize something in the field, and I realize that through my post-processing and kind of my approach to it. Again, software platform agnostic, more about the creative whys, not necessarily the how-tos. But
gotcha.
It's been well received for the two I've done with that topic so far. So yeah, looking forward to presenting to a bigger group. I think. I don't know how many attendees he'll have, and then they get access for a period of time afterwards too. But I think he said his list is up to like 6,000 people or something. So,
oh wow, that's nice.
Yeah. The downside is it's in the UK, so I can't really do much to get a subtle plug-in for the Utah workshop or anything. Maybe somebody will fly over, but odds are pretty low there. Other than that, just birthday. Took a week off from the diet, which probably hasn't helped my energy levels either, with overload of sugar and calories, and I'm not used to. But this week I've gotten back on track a little bit, and we'll go from there. So yeah, nothing terribly exciting. I did. How could I forget this? I've shipped off a couple box sets. So
nice.
I've been doing some printing again, which is nice. So.
Oh, good.
Been wanting to do some printing just for around the house, but been putting that off. So it was nice to get the printer up and running again and watch all the glorious prints run off. So
that's awesome.
All right. Well, enough rambling about what we've been up to. Let's pivot into today's topic. So we wanted to talk about working in tough conditions from a nature photography standpoint, and not just tough in terms of bad weather, but it could be maybe less than quote-unquote ideal light, or maybe not the light we were hoping for, but also could be working in harsh midday light and things like that in terms of how we might approach things. So, we've touched on some of this loosely. Like, I don't want to go into the whole gear discussion about how do we protect our gear and that. I feel like we've covered that pretty well between our gear-specific episode and the last one recorded was specifically around does camera brand and camera model matter, which, again, some of these things we'll talk about today, they could matter in terms of weather sealing and that, but I don't think we need to rehash it necessarily.
It's about the mindset.
Yes.
The mindset of bad conditions. How does that impact? I think from you and I, we've on the workshops we've seen forecasted bad weather, and there's a mindset, that I think. Yeah, it's about the mindset of bad weather and poor conditions. And like you said, it can be precipitation, or it can even just be the type of light you're getting. Right.
Yeah, and we've touched on that too. Seeing workshop participants, we roll up to an overlook, and it's not necessarily going to kick off the killer sunrise or sunset colors and kind of like, well, what are we doing? Are we going to stay here? And it's like, well, let's just hang about and pull out the long lens and see what little detail shots you can pick out in that. So, yeah, I think a lot of it is the mindset and expectations, and we've talked about the expectations piece plenty as well, in terms of the more you go into it with built-up expectations around, I got to have this amazing sunset or sunrise, and then that doesn't develop, it can shut you down. So I think expectations and managing those go a long way, and being flexible. And for me and for you, I assume too, like, it's pretty easy to deal with less than quote unquote ideal conditions, because I don't, there's not many conditions I look at as bad conditions. There's certainly there is some, like, if it's just that right, like, heaviness of clouds and they're just kind of flat and gray, and you're not getting much interest in anything. Sure, that's the case, but like, I'll shoot in midday, I'll shoot in late morning, I'll shoot at, the ideal golden hour, I'll shoot blue hour. Like, I'm just going to go out and, again, see what I see, which certainly makes it easier in that regard. But we can get into a little bit more around some of the specifics around this. So I would say, like, my general approach when conditions aren't again, that I'm going to continue to say quote unquote ideal, because for me, I try to get away from that mindset of ideal conditions. Yeah, there's some great conditions that are wonderful to come across, but I try to keep from building it up in my mind as ideal versus not ideal. So, do I embrace it or do I pivot? I react to it. So that might be pivoting. It might be I already kind of knew what I was going into and just embracing what I've got. And again, letting curiosity kind of be my guide in terms of, okay, here's what I've got to work with. What might I be able to find? And kind of going from there. Yep. How about you? What do you take as a general approach to this kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's about the flexibility of it. And like you said, if you go into it thinking I need these ideal conditions or I need this specific thing to happen, whether it be a sunrise, sunset, or maybe you're going to go photograph some waterfalls and you're doing midday and you're hoping for a little bit of overcast because the waterfall below you to shoot and you don't get it. If you lock into I need X, Y, and Z to get a good photo today, you're setting yourself up for disappointment versus... If X, Y, and Z happen, awesome. That's ideal conditions, and that's great. But there's so many more options that you can just sort of adjust on the fly as you approach the scene. And you don't have to have ideal. All conditions can be good with the right mindset, right? Like, and I admit that's hard. You mentioned you don't mind shooting midday bright sun. I struggle with that a bit. I have my little tricks, but that's probably my most disappointing condition is harsh midday sun. It happens to be the only time I can get out. And that's probably the one I have to talk myself through most often to okay, I can make something happen here. I can find something. I just have to look a little harder. But yeah, flexibility I think is key, and just ready to shift what you've got in mind to see. Because I
thought you were about to say the forbidden phrase.
No. I'm trying to avoid it lest we hit our first legal issue on the podcast. So
have stops lawyers come after us.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I would say having that mindset of built up, I've got to have X, Y, and Z. Not only is it likely to lead to disappointment, it's likely to lead to failure. And again, we've talked about that before. Like I used to go out with that mentality, and if I didn't get X, Y, and Z, I would just shut down, and I'd be mad, frustrated, whatever. Wouldn't even take the camera out at any point. I wouldn't have that curiosity to look around and see, okay, well that didn't work out. What else is there? Again, letting curiosity be my guide kind of thing. So yeah, I definitely think managing expectations is huge, and seeing the quote unquote less than ideal conditions as an opportunity to try something new or challenge yourself. You mentioned waterfalls and bright kind of midday sunlight. Yes, that can be very tough, especially when you're looking at very strong contrast and hot spots on the water in that. But an example of that would be my trip to Arkansas 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago? It's 2024. So a year and a half. Anyways, looking at that, and there were several days where, again, we've talked about my inability to necessarily wake up at the crack of dawn or a little bit beforehand.
You are not a sunrise person.
No, I'm not. I need to be better about that. But anyway, so there were times I was kind of putting myself in that position of working with later morning light and even getting closer to noon. And maybe there were some clouds drifting over, but there were a couple instances where I was definitely working with almost crystal blue skies, clear skies. And there's this waterfall I want to shoot. Okay, well, what do I need to do? How do I need to approach this maybe a little bit differently to embrace the strong light on the waterfall while managing the stark contrast in the shadows and approaching that? Maybe I got to do an exposure blend. Maybe I just need to, be a little bit more mindful about how I'm framing the shot or what have you. So again, it's instead of shutting down, it's letting curiosity be your guide. And I think so often, especially with newer photographers, it's very easy to get into the trap of quote unquote bad weather is bad conditions, because as a normal human being, like most everybody loves those bright sunny days and strong light and warm temps and whatnot. And as photographers, we often start looking at it as like, oh, that's the worst kind of conditions I could go out and shoot. And actually I had this conversation with I had a woman reach out to me about doing a private one-on-one workshop for her husband as a gift here in North Texas. And one of the things she had asked about was, well, how do you handle it with weather, if there's bad weather or not? And I kind of briefly explained, like, well, really bad weather for photography is like, that's our golden ticket in many regards. So obviously if it's dangerous, that's one thing.
Right.
If we're looking at softball size hail, like we sometimes get here in Texas, I'm not going to take somebody out. But yeah, it's just, I think for those newer photographers, you kind of come in with that like sunny beach day mindset around what's good weather versus bad weather. But then as you get into it, you kind of realize that, oh, there's actually a lot more opportunity when you embrace all kinds of weather in terms of a photography standpoint. So I guess to that end, like, can bad weather or weather contrary to what we were hoping for, can that push our creativity? I think absolutely yes, if you approach it with the right mindset and allow it to kind of, again, pique your curiosity and force you to take a little different creative approach to things.
Yep. I agree. When I was in New River Gorge, I mentioned it on one of our bonus episodes, I think, maybe somewhere else even. But I went to a sunrise spot. I mean, it was a sunrise spot. That's what you go for. And I drove New River Gorge. It's super spread out. It follows the river. So it's not like a lot of national parks where it's sort of clumped. It follows the river. So I'd driven, I don't know, an hour and 15 minutes or so, maybe even a little longer to get to the spot at sunrise. So I was driving in the dark, got there, and it was fogged in. And if I'd have been stuck on the mindset of I'm here for a sunrise photo, that outing would have been just miserable, discouraging, and frustrating. And I was sitting there, and I did sit at the overlook for a little bit, thinking, oh, if this sun cuts through, I get some cool stuff. Wasn't really moving, and then I'm suddenly like, I'd kill for a foggy day back in Ohio. So I packed up my bag and then went to one of the more open areas where there's a lot of woodlands and trees, and I had a great time. I wandered around, got lots of great photos from the spot. Didn't get the sunrise, but it really wasn't a big deal. It was I was flexible, adapted, and walked away with some photos I was pretty happy with. But it would have been real easy to be pigeonholed into, I'm here for sunrise, it's fogged in, by the time the fog clears, it's bright, harsh sun. That's what happened, but I still made the best of it. And I wouldn't even say make the best of it. I had a good time and walked away with some good photos just by being able to shift, okay, guess we're doing fog photos this morning.
Right. Yeah, and my local park is kind of an example of the same kind of concept in terms of some of my favorite photos I've gotten from that park, and really kind of what spurred me to really embrace that park and go back there as often as I do is I went out on a morning where it was heavy fog. Those are very rare here in North Texas, and I got a lot of great photos leveraging the fog and how it kind of opens up so many new compositions with the chaos of the woodlands and helping kind of calm that and mask that a little bit.
Yep.
But if my mindset was, okay, I'm only going to the park when it's foggy, I would say of the gallery I've got from Texas now, probably at least 90% of my images are not foggy. Like, it's just not going to happen often enough. Or if it does, it happens to be on a day I can't go out. Seems to be the recent trend in the last couple of years. But, again, it's embracing what you're given. And I've got shots from the local park in strong sunlight, early morning light, and more often than not, it's clear skies just because of the nature of the beast here.
Yep.
But I didn't let myself get locked into that. Oh, well, I only am going to get anything good if I go out with fog. So, anyways, I think we've beaten that point more than enough. But yeah, just circling back, I would say the one thing like where I'm going to make a change in terms of my plans would be safety. It's a horrible lightning storm rolling through, or like Colorado is an example. If I'm up on an exposed mountain pass and there's a storm rolling through, like maybe I'm not going to hang out there because I don't want to get struck by lightning. Here in Texas, it's usually hail is the big concern in terms of going out, and even if it's golf ball size hail, like here that's relatively small, but I don't want to be standing out in it. So factoring in things like that from a personal safety standpoint. In terms of further adaptation to working in bad weather specifically, and let's talk to bad weather, I guess, at this point, as opposed to just different kinds of light. If I'm going out in rain or snow, it's being prepared in advance, obviously, depending on the temperature. If it's snowing, obviously it's going to be much colder. So, do I have dry base layers? Do I have waterproof gloves? Do I have a towel to wipe off my kit if the snow is melting on it? Things like that. And that's also the one time snow and rain is the only time I'll bust out my lens hood typically. I think I've mentioned my disdain for lens hoods in general. I just feel like they get in the way and just add more bulk, and I'm kind of flipping around to get the thing back in my bag properly with my camera and lens. But if it's raining, lens hood can be great to keep the rain off your lens, keep snow off your lens, and things of that nature. So again, it's more of a preparation standpoint. Usually my lens hoods are in the truck, so I've got to remember, okay, I might get some rain, or it is raining, so I got to make sure I carry those with me. Obviously, I don't know that we want to go down a whole rabbit hole around dressing appropriately for the weather and that, but
it's important though.
It is important.
I think to be creative,
you want to be warm, and especially you want to be dry.
Yep.
And it kind of goes back to the whole removing the hurdles and roadblocks from a creativity standpoint, from a mental creativity standpoint, and engagement standpoint. If you're wet and miserable, or wet and cold and miserable, you're probably not going to be real jazzed about going around looking for compositions to shoot. If you're freezing your toes off, back in 2023, standing on top of these overlooks at Bryce Canyon at 9,000 feet, a little bit of a breeze. It was like 30 degrees out, but with the wind chill, my gosh, I don't know. And at that elevation too is probably cooler. And I was freezing to death, and I thought I was prepared. I had hand warmers, I had my gloves and everything, and I even had toe warmers in my boots. That's when I found out that those things have expiration dates for a reason. They weren't working. So, I was miserable in terms of my fingers were killing me, my toes were freezing. I pushed through it, but that was certainly very much forefront of mind, and that I wasn't fully prepared in terms of having the right unexpired equipment on me in that regard. So I don't know. How about you? Anything you do in particular when you're going to be facing or possibly facing some bad weather?
A lot of the similar things, again, not to dwell on the gear, try to keep it away, but we've talked before, we do use fairly professional level equipment that can handle the weather. So I don't stress a whole lot about it. Super cold, take some extra batteries and stuff, but I don't want to rehash too much of that. I do think the clothing is super important. Again, we don't have to dive completely in that rabbit hole, but like you were saying, if you're cold, if you're wet, if you're too hot, any of those things keeps your mind from being creative. And it's just like we've talked about, getting your camera to be an extension of yourself. You want all of those hurdles out of the way so your mind can focus on the creativity of what's going on. So I do think, some preparation for adverse weather is important, because if you can be comfortable, your mind is opened up to be creative. Because I agree with you. If I'm cold sitting for a sunset or just anywhere, waiting for something or looking for something, it is not a fun experience, and my head is certainly not open to the creative things.
Right. Or toughing it out and sticking around for that magical moment that might arrive.
Right.
You're less likely to do that, if you're absolutely miserable and hating life. So I would agree, like from a gear standpoint, we've already talked about that plenty. I think for most people, your gear is probably going to be okay. Just be smart about it. But the clothing is certainly important, and footwear. If it's raining or snowing, are you keeping your feet not only warm, but are they going to be kept dry? How are you accounting for that kind of stuff? If I know it's really going to be wet, I might go ahead, even though I'm not going to be wading in streams or anything, I might throw on my neoprene socks just to keep moisture out of the boots. I've got waterproof boots, but, stuff happens. Also, those neoprenes come up to just below my knees, so my lower legs are going to be nice and dry. So, I definitely think we've already both mentioned it, but the one thing I would say in terms of adapting to the tough weather more than anything is probably just preparation in terms of your personal comfort and your personal safety. Taking that umbrella to stand under while you might be standing around and waiting. Again, having the hand warmers since that fiasco in Bryce Canyon, I actually switched over. I've got USB rechargeable hand warmers that I can just keep in my pocket, which work really well. So I don't have to worry about them expiring. I just have to worry about them being charged up. So it's little things like that. And then kind of moving on beyond that in terms of, okay, we're at least comfortable enough out in the bad weather that we got some really nice shots. We want to go back and edit them. There's a piece of it in that regard, too, from an editing standpoint, that I'm going to edit a foggy scene different than a sunny scene, different than a snowy scene, different than maybe a rainy scene, and understanding how to adapt not just the act of making the photo, but adapt when you're actually sitting at the computer and it comes time to processing it, and think, I want to maybe emphasize the atmospheric effects of the weather or the fog or whatever. So maybe a little bit of dehaze might come into the mix, or you're lowering contrast more than you would normally. And again, I don't think we want to go into a whole rabbit hole around the post-processing approaches too, but that is something to consider. Is it goes beyond just making the photo right. Like you've got to come back and realize that, oh, well, if I typically do like a fairly strong S-curve to do Murray Livingston's hated mid-tone contrast, maybe I'm going to do a little less of a steep mid-tone adjustment on that tone curve to make sure.
We're still going to do it, Murray, though. We're still going to do it.
Maybe. We'll see. Have you recovered from that yet, Jeffrey?
I'm still in shock every time. I happen to see that thumbnail that it's sitting in our queue, getting all set up, and I'm just like, oh.
Was it that one? I think I gave you a terrified face on that one.
Yes, I have a terrified face on that one. Yep.
I've got another one coming up where I've got duct tape over your mouth because me and the guest kept talking over you. So.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, totally off topic there. Just recapping, adaptation to bad weather, I think, is mostly comfort and safety standpoint for your physical self, and then also taking that shift of mindset and adaptability back to the computer side of things as well when you're sitting down to process it. Because maybe with some of these really atmospheric scenes, you do need to add a little bit of contrast in just to emphasize the details that you were shooting or whatever. But it's a balancing act between pushing it too far and then you lose all of the impact of the conditions that you shot in, whether it be snow or rain or fog or what have you.
Like you want to lean into the conditions that were there. If there's a low contrasty scene, you're right. You may need to build a little contrast in there, but you don't want to force something to happen just because your mind is like, well, normally when I photograph this scene, it's high contrast. It's like, well, a little bit of fog, a little bit of rain. You might have portions of the scene that are going to be higher contrast than others. Maybe you want a tree to stand out a little more, but all of the other background noise to sort of fade away into that low contrast. So, I think it's important to keep that in mind. Otherwise, you're trying to work your image into something that it's not. You're fighting it as you go. And like you said, changing weather conditions impact that editing style, I think. Yeah,
I mean, there's no point in going out and shooting those type of conditions and then coming back and basically undoing those conditions in the active post-processing, which I used to do at times. Like, I would be out and maybe it'd be raining in the distance and it'd be a little hazy off in the distance, and I would work to counteract that as much as possible. And sometimes you do, because, again, it just depends on what look you're going for. But again, it's embracing, I shot in those conditions for a reason, so why am I sitting here undoing or counteracting every little aspect of the benefits of those conditions? And if it's hazy and ethereal, embrace an ethereal look. We've all seen plenty of photos that are really beautiful with just hints of the subjects kind of coming through the conditions. So I guess shifting from there, we touched on the midday photography, and I know you said you shy away from it. When you do embrace it, is there anything you do differently in terms of the making of the photo in the field or the processing or both?
Anytime I hit a harsh, bright light, my head starts to shift to like high contrast, black and white thought. It is sort of where my head goes. I'm like, okay, I'm probably going to shoot this like that, which has typically worked well, and I've been able to walk away with some decent stuff with that. But that's one mind shift I have. And I recently started playing with infrared lens filters. Yeah, and those work really well on bright, sunny days if you've got some other stuff going along. So I'll probably add that to my toolkit as well as a potential. In fact, I did a video recently on one of those filters, and I commented that when I was in West Virginia, New River Gorge area, I was doing a lot of scouting. So I was out in midday, mainly curious about finding a composition so that if I made it back at different conditions, I would know where I want to be and how to get there and do it, how it is at sunrise. I want to know what path I'm following in the dark and not stumbling around. But I wish I'd been a little more open-minded even on that trip to have broken out that infrared filter to play with, because there's a couple scenes that I think back now that I've played with it, like, man, that probably really would have played real well with it. So for bright and sunny, that's where I struggle the most, because like I said, even on New River trip, I sort of left my camera in the Forerunner a couple times when I was scouting things. But high contrast, black and white, and I think I'm adding infrared to a little bit of my toolbox.
So I don't want to go down an infrared rabbit hole either, but I'm personally curious. So I've always heard with the filters that it really lengthens the exposure time you've got to use.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes, very, very much. I was bright, sunny day for one of my scenes, and I was still clocking like 20, 25 second exposures.
Oh, wow. I knew it was greater. I didn't know if it was that much.
Yeah, it's pretty big. If you're going to we should save that for another episode.
That's probably
You're
an
gonna dive
episode
down the
in and of
infrared,
itself.
though.
Right.
A camera conversion is probably where you want to go. But the filter's fun to play with, especially for. It's fun to play with. But it does. Long exposure is pretty much the name of the game.
Yeah, I had thought about taking my old EOS R. Still haven't sold off yet, but taking that and doing an infrared conversion. But A, I don't think it's the best for that, and B, I don't want to carry 3 bodies. Like 2's plenty. I don't want to do it on my second body because I want to be able to shoot with short lens and long lens and everything. So I've always been curious about the filters, but the one thing that's always held me back is that length and exposure time I've heard about.
It's a long exposure.
Yeah, so that's one way you can approach it. I know for me personally, and ironically, maybe not ironically, maybe it was subconscious, but I just wrote about this in this next coming featured frames over my Patreon episode, or featured frames number 23. One of the things I talked about was attacking is not really the right word, embracing harsher late morning sunlight on a trip to Utah back in the fall of 2023. In terms of, like, I've got these beautiful fall colors and the oh gosh, now I'm forgetting how to pronounce it again. Paria, I think it's Paria River Basin.
Okay, yep.
Nathan St. Andre corrected me on that once, and I've already forgotten it. But anyways, sorry, Utah people. I don't even know what you're called. Wow, I'm on a tangent. Let's roll this back in. Whew, ADHD, here we go. Anyways, around that river basin, let's just say, like, just gorgeous cottonwood trees. Vibrant gold, like about as peak as you can get in terms of the colors. And, it was like 10 a.m. Like, I didn't want to stop shooting, but the light was getting quite harsh. And being southern Utah, not real often that I'm encountering clouds or clouds that are really going to cut the light a whole lot. So I'm having to embrace that harsh light. For me, I've kind of got 2, I'd say, primary approaches, maybe 3. One, definitely black and white, like trying to see the landscape around me in black and white. And again, maybe I'll switch my camera into a black and white mode and just kind of pan around and try different compositions and see what looks interesting or compelling. So certainly that, embracing the contrast through black and white, which I often edit with more contrast anyways, depending on the scene. The other thing I do, though, maybe counterintuitively, is I look at it as an opportunity to embrace a high-key approach, where I'm trying to really brighten the entire scene. So even though I'm working with a very high-contrast environment, which isn't necessarily where you would typically think high-key, and maybe it's a variation of a high-key approach when you get down to it, but like these photos in Utah that I just wrote about in the featured frames, it's taking what was started out as a high contrast scene, and the sunlight was hitting the side of the leaves facing me, whereas typically I like to shoot fall leaves or leaves of any type really with the light kind of coming from behind because you get that nice glow. Instead, I was getting that direct light on them from the front, and it almost kind of takes away some of the interest in the leaves. So, okay, I've got to embrace that, and a lot of it comes down to me for the processing. I might, depending on how harsh the contrast is, I might do an extra frame to make sure I've got good detail on the shadows and then good detail on the highlights and then blend the two together. But ultimately what I'm doing in post is I'm going in and raising my shadows a whole lot, if not maxing them out, raising even the black slider a whole lot, but I'm not really boosting the overall exposure limit in terms of that upper limit from a highlight standpoint, because I don't want to blow out the highlights. So it's pushing everything towards the highlight end of the spectrum or the highlight end of the histogram without pushing it too far, and then you just end up with blobs of color or light, what have you. So it's, since I know I've got that editing tool or trick, whatever you want to call it, in my back pocket, it's also looking at the environment, the landscape around me with that mindset of, okay, I can't really capture it in the camera that way, but let's look at these scenes thinking through to that end realization of the vision, kind of going back to the presentation I was talking about. Like, I'm trying to visualize it in the field. This is the end point I want to work towards. So let me compose scenes knowing that in post I'm going to work towards something a little bit differently. And maybe that starts blurring the line a little bit towards quote unquote true representational approach I typically take to my post-processing. But even like looking at those Utah photos when I was wrapping up writing the featured frames yesterday, like they're still like, when you think about how your eye operates and your brain operates with what's coming into your eye, like you're not necessarily seeing pure blacks in the shadows or blown out highlights in the brightest areas. Your mind is kind of blended it all together. So, post where I'm pulling in detail into the shadows, and now suddenly you're seeing the light reflecting off the foliage on the ground and reflecting up into the tree structure and that. Like you start kind of piecing it together, and it's a different approach, but I don't think it necessarily means it's an unrealistic or misrepresented approach in terms of what I actually saw and experienced. So probably a little hard to describe it in terms of final appearance on a primarily audio-based podcast. But if you go look at some of my Utah photos in fall, you'll see some of these higher key images, and we can throw some links in the show notes too. But it's, for me, it's knowing that, again, I've got that processing toolkit available to me, so that might change how I look at it versus looking for embracing the harshness and the high contrast if I'm going to go into it with a black and white mind frame. So that goes, again, back to kind of knowing what your end game is when you're in the act of making the photo, as opposed to making a photo and then figuring out the end result later on. I think you're always going to kind of work better working through it from start to finish, as opposed to getting a file and then trying to brute forcing your way into, oh, well, maybe it didn't quite work the way I'd hoped, but now can I ram in and edit that kind of gets it to some kind of acceptable level that maybe isn't necessarily what I really saw and wanted to represent when I was in the field. So it's linking those things together, I think. The opposite side of that would be handling those days where you do have the dull skies. To me, the worst thing you can run into, especially if you're shooting wider scenes, obviously, is when you've got just the flat gray, pretty bright sky, but it's enough to really cut the light down. So you've got a very soft landscape. If you photograph the sky at all, like no amount of exposure control or editing is going to bring any texture into the sky, because there just wasn't any. So I don't know, how do you generally approach moments like that with the weather?
Yeah, I mean, those are tough. I think, and for the reason you described, if it's a wide angle scene on an overcast, flat light day, it's just really hard. So to me, that's where I shift what I'm thinking about and move towards smaller scenes, look for those points of detail. Even under flat light, there can still be some contrast between colors somewhere, like a light side of a rock, dark side of the rock, or something against a dark background, and vice versa, that you can still get something out of. Or even smaller than that, and mud cracks or arrangements of small stones that happen to be alongside the path, that because they're more flatly lit, that you can focus on their textures and patterns as opposed to the light. So, and then of course for waterfalls, I'll take an overcast day a lot of times, anyways. But if it's not a situation like that, that's usually where I sort of shift away from the wide angle scenes and into picking out pieces of detail and textures that sort of make sense to me. Yeah,
I'd say my approach is typically the same. I do find that type of sky is probably the hardest for me to photograph, and it's the one where I would say if I do have that kind of like creative shutdown hit me, it's probably going to be in conditions like that where there's just not a lot of contrast and interest in the landscape because of the soft sky, and there's not enough light filtering through, but that sky is so bright you can't really include the sky. If you include the sky, it's just going to be blown out anyways. Now you can do it creatively, maybe you've got a tree with some branches arching into the sky or whatever. And again, there you're kind of embracing it. That might be a scenario where I'm going to shoot black and white, but I'm going to blow out the sky intentionally and go for that really high key look and almost dreamy, ethereal look. And I've got some photos like that in my portfolio. Not a lot, but I do have some. So that's, if I were to include any sky, it's still going to be a smaller scene. It's not going to be a wide landscape generally.
Right.
As far as the smaller scenes go, to your point, when you're in that kind of light, you really have to look very carefully for those kind of hints of micro contrast, like, this side of this scene is just a little bit darker, a little bit brighter, and maybe I can play with that. But that is one area where I really struggle, especially when you do get into that midday. That might be a case where I go black and white, because typically your colors aren't going to be very bold anyways, so maybe I can leverage black and white to either build in contrast in post, because again, as we've talked previously, black and white, I'm much more likely to carve my edit instead of just lightly paint my edit in terms of how aggressive I'll be with tweaking the contrast and stuff like that. But yeah, I do struggle with those, and let's be realistic. There are some times where you're going to go out and it just doesn't tickle your fancy, so to speak.
Right.
But the light is just super challenging, or your mind's not in the right place or whatever. I've got times, doesn't happen real often, but probably 5% of the time I've gone to my local park at least. I don't come away with a photo. Either I haven't taken one, or I get back and I'm just like, it was an admirable effort, but it just didn't work out. So to me, that's an opportunity to kind of, like I said, challenge myself, try something maybe a little bit newer, different, try some of those really, really small scenes, like a Sarah Moreno or Jennifer Renwick that I struggle with. So it's an opportunity to kind of practice in that regard too, which I think is something that we haven't touched on, is if your conditions just aren't working for you, you can still go out and take some test compositions.
Such a great point. That's a great time to, I love that point.
Right. Practice your compositional skills, or just take some scouting shots. That's when I'll whip out the cell phone and be like, all right, this light's not going to work with this scene, but I like the scene. I'd like to see it in early blue hour, dawn light, or dusk, or what have you, or with golden hour, whatever scenario you might want to look for. Take the photo on your phone. Now you got it GPS tagged, so my local park's not that big, but still it's big enough. I'm not going to remember where every little thing is. So now I've got it tagged on my phone, and I can pull it up on the map in the future, so that when I'm there, I can hike towards it and see what it looks like in different lighting conditions. Also, it gives me a reason to go back and again, try again. I had that happen this spring where I went out and it was more of I'm just kind of curious to see what the park looks like. I think I was wanting to get some exercise in ahead of that Smoky Mountains workshop we did. So I was there later in the morning without any real intention of expecting to find photography opportunities, but I had several spots that I was able to scout. I was able to get back there a couple of days later, and I got some photos that I was really happy with. So there's always opportunity, even if it's just from a future consideration standpoint, if the conditions truly just aren't working out for you.
Yeah.
So pivoting again from that, moving on from working in the different types of light and maybe how you can approach different kinds of light differently. Again, we've touched on it. We just recently recorded an episode around the mobile apps that we use out in the field or for planning for trips. So again, I don't think we need to take a deep dive on that. But for you, Jeffrey, again, I think you leverage more of the weather apps than I do. So anything either from a tough conditions standpoint or knowing that you're going to be going into tough conditions from a just app standpoint to help you kind of plan and get your mindset in the right place.
Yep. Yeah. So I do make. I think we talked in the app episode. I've lost count of how many weather apps I have installed on my phone, and how many of them are actually paid weather apps on top of that. With that said, I'm a big advocate. Don't become a slave to the weather apps. I think you and I talked about that in the Smokies. It's like, because so many times they're not quite right, or because you're in the one valley over, what did happen over on the other side didn't happen to where you're at. But with that said, don't be a slave to the weather apps. But I do like to. What's going on at the very least from a safety perspective? Is there something crazy coming? But beyond that, I like to take a quick look. I've mentioned I use Carrot, which is just a real fast, super easy. I can change what forecast model it uses, and just to get a feel for it. Is it going to be a hot day? Is it going to be a bright sunny day? Or are they calling for partly cloudy? Wind, that might impact what I want to go look at today. If it's super windy, I might go someplace different than if it's a light breeze. So I do have an element of planning. I like to sort of know, is there a chance of fog or anything like that? But I won't start making drastic changes based on the app. It's almost more to place back to what we talked about earlier, like, should I bring a different set of clothes with me? Because, it looks like it's going to rain a lot. I'd better make sure I have double-check that rain jacket's in there, that cover. It's more from that, and then if I get there and I don't need it, it's no big deal. I'm still having a good time. So, I do check the apps, Carrot, Windy, AccuWeather, things like that. But I'm not a slave to them. It's as much as it's being prepared and thinking about where I might want to go if the weather forecast is correct on that.
Yeah, for me, it's location dependent. So if I'm thinking about going out and shooting locally here in Texas, like I've got one choice in terms of where I'm going to go. So it's not like I can really I'm going to go into the mountains today instead of chase waterfalls, because I have neither of those things. I've got a local woodland, and that's about it. But it might help me. Well, again, it's going to go back to, like, if there's rain in the forecast, what type of rain are we talking about? Are we talking about like a nice soaking rain, which can be a little miserable, and I know the trails are going to be muddy, but I'm not having to worry about getting struck by lightning or getting conked on the head with a grapefruit-sized chunk of hail. I know I'm not exaggerating. We get that kind of stuff in Texas, so that's why our insurance is so high. But anyways, so it's more of I'll take a quick look from is it safe to go out? Is it good to go out in that regard? But also, if I'm not worried about that necessarily, but it's going to be windier this morning, well, maybe instead of going out and photographing fall colors with the traditional quote-unquote cliche, like here's a branch with great colors and the leaves are tack sharp, like maybe I'm going to have to embrace the movement and do some longer exposures. And kind of counterintuitively, maybe I'm going to throw an ND filter on so I can really get a longer exposure and blur out the grasses that are moving anyways, or the leaves or what have you. It's knowing I'm going to have to go in with a little bit different mindset than maybe what I had intended. Conversely, maybe I know I'm going to go in and I want to still freeze the motion, but that means I'm going to have to shoot it at pretty high ISO. Yep. And I'll have to clean up the files after the fact or whatever. So it's more of just helping me know what I'm going to be potentially running into, especially here. Like, we don't have a lot of pocket weather like you do in the mountains. Like you said, I'm not going to be like, oh, this valley over. Like, I don't have valleys. I've got a 50-foot elevation change. So the weather is the weather. But that, again, goes to the location dependency. When I'm in Utah, for instance, there is greater elevation change there, but I found it to be fairly accurate. And really what I'm looking for there, I've never encountered like bad storms or anything in Utah, given the time of year when I go there. It's not monsoon season or anything like that, but I'm being conscious of, we're laughing because I just had to cut out a brain freeze moment for myself. But anyways, I am being conscious of a road condition standpoint with Utah, especially. Yep. The Utah mud is very different from like East Coast mud. It's basically you get in that mud and you're on ice, essentially. Mm-hmm. So like Cottonwood Canyon Road, where I like to go along and see what I see, it's a dirt and gravel road, and a lot of it's more dirt than gravel. So am I going to have to worry about getting stuck there, or just flash flooding? And it may not be like a big flood is coming through and washing through the entire river plain, but it could wash out the road or what have you. So it's more from a safety standpoint in that regard, like making sure I can get out safely in that, not necessarily that I'm worried about in the moment safety. Then there's the Colorado experiences where we encountered, I think we talked about this in the bonus episode, which, by the way, if you want to listen to that bonus episode, sign up for our Patreon. It's free for all for this first bonus episode. But, we encountered a lot of variable weather, and we certainly encountered there the whole challenge of, okay, well, the forecast for Silverton's saying this, but I know if I just go up this pass and go on the other side, the forecast could be entirely different. So Silverton's getting rain, but that doesn't mean it's getting rain there. So it's that challenge, but also typically I'm doing less forecast downloading there, and it's more like, let's look at the radar and kind of look at that future radar if I've got signal and see what's coming through. Just trying to gauge, okay, is this weather system expected to move over the pass, or is it going to hit the mountain peaks and just kind of stall out, or what's going on here? Right. Again, when I'm at those high elevations on exposed, not really shelf road, but you know what I mean, just mountain road or whatever. Yep. I don't want to be up there if there's a chance of lightning, and maybe I'm overly cautious with it given my experiences with bad storms in Texas. But if I hear thunder and I'm up in an area like that, I typically don't hang around. So it's also just mental awareness and listening to your surroundings, so to speak. But yeah, the apps, you know me, I just, it's bare minimum and I'm just going to roll. So,
yep, that makes sense.
So, Jeffrey, when you do go out and let's say you've looked at the forecast and you think it's going to be workable conditions or maybe even exciting conditions, when that doesn't happen, do you kind of already have a backup plan in mind, or do you still kind of take that go with the flow approach and figure something out in the spur of the moment, head somewhere else, or kind of how do you address that kind of thing?
I feel like I sort of go with the flow for the most part. I feel like I go with the flow. So if I'm going somewhere and the conditions just don't, I mean, our Smokies workshop, I think, is a good example of, I guess I considered a backup position, but we decided to stick it out and see what happened. And that was that night up at Kauai when the fog had rolled in up the clouds had descended and we were banked in fog for what was supposed to be a sunset shoot.
Right.
And I think that would have been a case where if I was truly a backup person, it would have been like, cool, no problem, we're going here to go do this. And really it was more, let's just go with the flow and let's see what unfolds here, because something interesting was going to happen, even if it was just some more fog photos that we leaned into, or all it takes just a little bit of shift. So I feel like I'm more of a go with the flow. Now, leading up back to that planning piece, I might choose one location over another based off the forecast. So, like if it's cloud heavy, I'm probably not going to aim for a overcast heavy to the point there's not really going to be a sunset. I will probably go to a location that's doesn't need a sunset to be while you're there. But if I've made my choice and get there and conditions have changed and I'm getting the effect I was trying to avoid, I probably not going to, I don't like to drive place to place to place hoping to be at the right place at the right time. I'd rather just go with the flow, and I'm going to make something happen here. So that's sort of my approach. More go with the flow if I mispredict where I should be, when I should be. It's just open mind, and let's see what's going on here, even though it's different than what I expected.
Yeah, I think I'm fairly similar, although I'm probably, it sounds like maybe a little bit more likely to jump in the truck, and not necessarily that I'm like trying to chase the light, but just, okay, the conditions aren't what I thought they were going to be. And again, maybe it's one of those scenarios where I got the shot that's available to me, or the couple shots that are available to me, and I can stand around longer and see what happens, or I can jump in the truck and go around a bend and see what's going on. Or again, maybe that's when I go out and just scout. Also, and obviously there's a big difference between leading a workshop and just being out on your own, right? So I want to do this leading a workshop, but I take that as an opportunity, especially if it's a place I'm not as familiar with, like Colorado or whatever. Like, I'll just go out and drive just to see what else is around, and kind of put photography on the back burner and take the time for myself. Like, I'm still going to have some beautiful scenery. And maybe I'll come across something either that works in that moment that if I was still sitting back at my original location, I wouldn't have been able to catch, or it's something, again, that I can take a quick cell phone snap of and tag it, so to speak, for a future visit. I'll throw a pin on X off-road and mark it as a great view or waterfall, or whatever the case may be, and I've got that future reference point, which maybe I wouldn't have found because I've just been standing there. So,
and that's the cool thing about what we do, right? Like, okay, so the photography might not work out right, but the odds are you're probably still in a really cool place, seeing something pretty cool. It might not be the greatest photo, but you're still out in nature experiencing something, even if it's wind and rain while you're like somewhere. So, again, back to that mindset. But no, I think that's a good approach to make the most of your situation, and not so much that you're chasing the light, but just, hey, I exhausted what was going to happen at the spot I was at, and let me go see what else I can see, because it's a great time to scout it out and get your pins, and maybe you'll come around the corner like you said, and hey, there's something is happening over here. So I think it's a good approach too.
Or maybe I don't go all that far away and I can swing back and it's been half an hour, what's going on now? So there's plenty of ways to approach. I think the main thing is just trying not to get frustrated. And that goes back to the expectations piece again. If you can go with the flow and just be adaptable, and to what we both just said, like, even if the photography doesn't pan out, still try to enjoy the experience, because you're out in nature and you're getting to be out there, and hopefully a little bit of solitude and peace and calm and quiet, and appreciate it for what it is. So I think we're approaching an hour here. Anything more you wanted to bring up on kind of that planning and flexibility and contingency, or?
No, I think I'm pretty good on that.
Kind of wind it down.
I don't like to push over planning, even though I do look at a lot of weather apps before I go. I don't like to be a slave to them. Awareness is maybe the best word for it.
Yeah, at some point we probably should get somebody on here that is like a hardcore planner and everything.
Yeah.
We both kind of have that similar approach, and
Yes.
I don't want to oversell too little planning, but
Right.
I do think
Yeah, there's a balance, but
there is a balance, and maybe sure I probably miss out on some stuff because I'm not planning as much as what some other folks do, but it works for me. And again, it goes to everything. It's what you're comfortable with, what excites you, what motivates you, what gets the creative juices flowing, and approaching it from that standpoint. But I do think, generally speaking, painting with a broad brush, if you're going in with really firm or built up expectations around, I got to have this specific kind of weather or light or whatever, then more often than not, you're going to be finding yourself pretty frustrated and disappointed and maybe even burning out, because that's the point I got to with it, where my expectations were never being met or rarely being met, and I wasn't enjoying the act of photography anymore. So I pivoted. So let's kind of wind this up. I kind of just touched on this, but maybe we can just use this question as kind of a final wrap up. But do you have any advice you'd give to somebody that does find themselves constantly frustrated by missing out on those perfect conditions? Anything beyond what we've talked about, or do you think we've beat that horse dead and done?
I mean, I think I'm trying to think of how to summarize. I mean, I think you almost summarized it pretty well.
Yeah, I kind of intentionally answered the question before I asked it.
Yeah, I have a hard time topping that. If you get stuck with something has to happen to have a good time or for it to be a successful trip, you're bound to find yourself frustrated. Try to enjoy the process. Try to enjoy everything, and getting the great photo is just icing on the cake. Learn to enjoy the process, and you'll just have a better time with it. I don't know how to bite-size that more articulately.
Yeah, like I said, I think I probably asked the question out of order in the flow of the conversation in terms of winding this down. The one thing I would say, like, if you just absolutely love chasing that quote-unquote perfect light, that's also perfectly fine. But I think you've got to work on your mental elasticity or whatever, in terms of not letting yourself get disappointed and understanding, like, hey, if this is the photography I love doing and this is really all I want to do, then going into it eyes wide open and understanding, like, I'm probably not going to encounter those perfect conditions far more often than I am, no matter how much planning you do. Like you were talking about on that bonus episode, like the forecast just wasn't right, so you show up and it's not what you thought it was going to be. So just understanding that too, like, nothing wrong if you want to chase that perfect light. Maybe that excites you, maybe it jazzes you up.
Enjoy the chase, right?
Right,
like
exactly.
We say enjoy the process, but like enjoy the chase, enjoy the hunt. If that's what you want to do, if you want to drive from point A to point B to C to D to E to try to capture it,
right?
Just enjoy the chase part, and if you don't get it, don't get frustrated. Continue to enjoy the chase tomorrow or the next week or the next trip. To do that. But enjoy that chase if that's what you want to do. Then as long as you're finding enjoyment in it, good deal.
Yeah. But as this old man will tell you, slow down and smell the roses.
Yes, for sure. For sure.
All right. Well, I think the last thing I've got here, and I should have done this in the kickoff of the episode. I always forget. We have a new Patreon member.
Oh, my.
We've actually got several, you probably know where this is going. We've got several new free members that can partake in our conversations. But I got to give a big shout out to the one and only Jeffrey's mom for supporting us on Patreon. She is our latest histogram hero. So thank you, Mrs. Tadlock.
Thank you.
I got all excited, like, oh, wow, somebody pledged $10 a month. And I was looking at the email address, like, hey,
it's my mom. Thanks, Mom.
Jeffrey's shilling his family.
Hey, family reunion. I was trying to get some support there.
Yeah, well, and if my oldest sister is listening to this, which I don't know if she's listened to any of the episodes, but Melissa, I just want to point out that you excitedly supported a pig racing Patreon, but you're not supporting your brother. So, I don't know, maybe we need to get into pig racing to get my sister to support
I guess.
me. But anyways, Melissa, I'm very disappointed. You hurt my feelings. Jeffrey's mom is supporting us, but my own sister... we decided she was the patriarch of the family since my parents are gone, or matriarch of the family, and She's not.
She's got responsibilities. Exactly.
Right?
She's got responsibilities to do.
Yeah. Forget about the damn pigs, Missy. So, anyways, on that wonky note, I think we can wrap this up. So, any last thoughts, Jeffrey, before I give my sign off?
Nah, let's shut her down.
Oh, was that a pun? That was really bad, but I got a tip of the hat to you, sir. All right. On that note, once again, don't forget to sign up for our Patreon as a free or paid member. Either way, you can join in on the post-episode discussions, which, again, we've had some lively conversations going on over there, which is great to see, even with the small community we've got. So I'm excited to see it continue to grow. If you do want to support us financially, absolutely, we would definitely appreciate that in terms of helping us actually cover the cost of running this podcast. Otherwise, until next time, take care.